Hi. If you can, please tell us your name and title and what research you work on.
Right. So my name's Michelle Oyen. I'm an associate professor of biomedical engineering at Wayne State University in lovely urban Detroit. And I do work on maternal health from an engineering perspective.
Cool. And so, what is important to know about some of the disease conditions you might work with?
Mhm. So the first thing to know is that this affects a ton of people. So 3.6 million babies born in the US last year. That's a lot of people. That costs a lot of money in our healthcare system. So the two most common surgeries in women are actually C-section and hysterectomy or removal of the uterus. So actually surgeries associated with the uterus make up a huge fraction of the total of healthcare costs in the US in any given year. And these just get treated as normal. Like it's normal to have that many surgeries. And in fact, pregnancy is usually where women really enter into the healthcare system interventionally for the first time. And that happens at a much younger age in women because of pregnancy than it does in men. So it's actually just a huge piece of healthcare spending. And 50% of babies born in the US are born under Medicaid. And so it's not just private health insurance spending, it's actually a balance between federal spending and private health insurance spending.
Cool. And so, I guess based on that, like, what's historically been done to treat these conditions, and going off Medicaid, how does that make a difference? Treatment.
Well, I mean, the way that things have been treated in the past is, I mean, obviously, childbirth is treated as though it's a normal, uneventful thing. And that leaves out the fact that there are a lot of problems in pregnancy. And so, even to this day, about 10% of babies are born preterm. So, one out of every 10 babies born is too early. That means that being born too early can be associated with things like problems with vision, problems with lung function, things that can last well into adulthood. And the other thing that's really important is that what happens in the womb can affect you for the rest of your life. So if your mother had preeclampsia, which is about 6 or 7% of all pregnancies, so again, a very large fraction, your mother had high blood pressure during pregnancy, that relates to you having cardiovascular disease later in life. So, what we think of as a woman's health problem in terms of pregnancy is actually just human health, because male or female, if your mother had high blood pressure when she was pregnant with you, you have greater risk factors later in life. And oh, actually, her cardiovascular risk factors 20 years after the pregnancy are also greater.
Wow. And so, just quick definition for those of us who don't know what preeclampsia is. That's high blood pressure during pregnancy, and
Yeah, and it's associated, it's not just high blood pressure, it's a syndromic thing where you also have kidney and liver function problems. And it's actually really interesting because it's due to the placenta, whereas the placenta inside the uterus is fetal tissue. And so the only way to essentially treat preeclampsia is to birth the baby, which actually sometimes then leads to a preterm birth if you do a C-section to get the baby out, because the placenta is actually trying to kill the mother.
oh wow, crazy. So what research do you do to help kind of solve some of these problems? Is it on preeclampsia? Is there other fields that you also work on?
Mhm. So we're doing a lot of work right now with both in vitro, looking at pregnancy, trying to understand parts of pregnancy that we can't really study in people and for which there's no animal model. So we do things like study the cells that form the placenta, which are called trophoblast cells. We put them in hydrogels and look at their behavior, so we can do that kind of lab experiments. But the other thing we do a lot of is actually computer modeling. So we try to model, make digital twins of pregnancy, of different parts of pregnancy, like the placenta, which functions to transport oxygen and nutrients to the fetus from the mother. So we make computer models of the placenta itself. We make computer models of the uterus when we're looking at C-section scars and problems with those C-section scars in subsequent pregnancies. So those are things that we can do as virtual experiments, and that gets around the fact that you can't really do research on pregnant women for very good reasons. And so it's part of the reason that pregnancy is so poorly understood is because there aren't good animal models for human pregnancy, and we can't do experiments on pregnant people because all pregnant people are considered a vulnerable population. And so this is a research black hole. We know so much less about pregnancy than we do about cardiovascular disease or the brain or orthopedics. I came from a musculoskeletal background. I started out doing cartilage and bone and ligaments, and then I ended up meeting a doctor who got me interested in pregnancy, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. There's nothing out here. There's so much research to be done.
Wow. So you mentioned that there aren't any good animal models during pregnancy. Why is that? I guess animals
So
work differently, right?
well, and it's particularly problematic in part because of the placenta, which is one of the reasons why the placenta is so interesting. Um, the placenta in humans has evolved to basically penetrate deeper into the mother's uterus. And that's because as humans, we have big brains, and so we need more oxygen. And so all of those adaptations in order to allow for more oxygen to get to the baby, sorry, to the fetus, does not actually allow for as much separation between the mother and the fetus across that placental barrier in humans as you see in other animals. And a second thing is because our pregnancies are long, the placenta actually takes over some of the hormonal functions of the pregnancy from the ovaries, and that doesn't happen in, say, rodents. So if you have a mouse model of looking at pregnancy, well, first of all, they're having litters, we're not. But then second of all, you have these structural and functional differences in what the placenta is actually doing that make it just a very, very poor animal model for studying human pregnancy.
Oh wow, crazy. And I saw that I guess leaves you to the how you now are doing kind of more computer models and digital twins and in vitro research. And so what are their limitations or any pitfalls or benefits, right, associated with that?
I
Like,
think it's I
oh,
think it's a
let's go.
win-win. I think there's a lot of benefits, and I think that's why for the last probably 6 or 7 years now, I've been really pushing to try to get more engineering students interested in studying pregnancy. And then on top of that, in late 2022 was the FDA Modernization Act passed by Congress, and that allows for data from computer models and in vitro systems, microphysiological systems to be used in informing clinical trials. So actually, that took animal models out as being a required pathway for going towards human interventions and allowed for computer models and in vitro systems to be part of that pathway. And so that one thing, the FDA Modernization Act, really opened up the doors for engineering opportunities and research into these areas of pregnancy that are very poorly understood and difficult to study.
Wow, that's great. So I guess we talked a lot about kind of current improvements, which is the that we can now use in vitro and computer models, right? So that's a major improvement in being able to study as well as develop new devices and new solutions within pregnancy and women's health. Um, what further improvements could be made or could we do here?
I mean, we just need to know more. We are lacking basic mechanistic understanding of so much of this. And if you don't have mechanistic understanding, you get caught in a doom loop where you don't have better diagnosis because even if you could diagnose things, you don't have any treatments or any preventions. And so it's like you have to somehow break into that loop and start improving diagnosis, which then drives interventions and preventions, which then drives better diagnosis. So we have to figure out a way to get into that loop and to start making real advances. And I'm really hopeful that because of some of the advances in imaging technologies, which, we use a lot of imaging data and building our computational models at all different length scales, from whole body models all the way down to very high resolution models of the placenta. So I'm really hopeful that the advances in imaging technology will drive some of that diagnostic improvements that'll then drive more in terms of the treatments.
Oh, that's great. And so, just to kind of wrap up, what advice would you have to our engineering students, or anyone who's trying to get into women's health and identifying problems and then being able to solve these problems?
Well, I think identifying problems is easy because women live longer than men, but have usually a poorer quality of life. And it's not just the kind of things I'm talking about that are specific to the reproductive system, things to do with menopause and hormones, all things that need a lot more research, but even things as simple as osteoporosis. I mean, if you have a hip fracture, which is much more likely to happen post menopause in women, um, you're likely to die within a year in like 30% of cases of hip fracture. So, I mean, there's so many places that you can get into women's health. Brain health, women get more Alzheimer's disease. Autoimmune system, women have more autoimmune disease. So I think it's just, kind of a refresh of the way we think about human health and disease, and saying, oh, well, human health, women's health, these all go together. And so where can we get into the system to try to see where there are potential problems and potential opportunities? And I think the answer to that right now is that the opportunities are huge because there's just so much that we don't know.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.